This study focuses on the impact of trauma on the child's well-being and academic performance and is a look at how teachers can effectively respond. Let's first look at the definition of trauma. Trauma is the reaction to an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening and has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning in physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Now, a little bit of background on trauma. It affects at least one student out of every 4, and many students are under enormous amounts of stress as a result of poverty, abuse, exposure to violence, family dysfunction, death, and divorce. The statement of the problem explains that it is critical for teachers to be knowledgeable and trained in their role as a supportive and sensitive presence in a child's life. Schools should create an environment where students feel protected and safe, where students can learn coping skills, and where supportive family and community partnerships can be formed and nurtured. The purpose of the study is to look at the impact a traumatic event can have on a child and how teachers can best respond to a child's trauma symptoms. I added a quote from Winnie the Pooh to illustrate the importance of believing in children and letting them know how brave and strong that they really are. A problem is the focus of a research investigation, but the research questions often can be the research problem in the form of questions. They typically dictate the type of data that this is to be collected and analyzed. There are 4 characteristics of good research questions. 1, the questions should be able to be investigated with resources. 2, they should be clear and specific. 3, they should be significant and worth investigating. And 4, they should be ethical and not involve any physical or psychological harm to anybody. Children struggling under chronic stress, if unidentified or untreated, can have lifelong consequences for physical and mental health and often lack the ability to reach their full potential. Therefore, it is particularly significant to look at trauma's impact and discuss the risk, effects, and responses. Some key terms are explained in the paper to give further detailed explanations for some of the language used in trauma education. So I won't list them here due to the time factor, but throughout the PowerPoint, I have tried to explain any unfamiliar terms. Since every child is unique and trauma affects each person differently, a study would be subjective due to the personal experiences of all those who have been exposed. As a teacher, the most important job is to recognize the symptoms of trauma and then show their support to the traumatized child through the therapeutic process. Teachers' responses should be timely, supportive, and professional. At the end of the first chapter, I summed up the importance that teachers should be trained and aware of how to help students cope with their feelings and knowledgeable about giving them the tools for their recovery. When teachers are part of an education process that offers compassion, respect, and safety, they can create mindfulness programs that can help strengthen a child's ability to succeed. When teachers engage in trauma-informed practices, they show a commitment to creating an environment where children feel valued, understood, accepted, and loved. So this section of the PowerPoint contains a review of the literature that was collected and researched. It contains information that looks at trauma and its effect on children, the types of trauma, its risk, and how teachers could approach the situation and effectively respond. Research information consisted of meaningful data found in university databases, scholarly articles, dissertations, websites, brochures, and other kinds of data. It is critical to find relevant and meaningful information that focuses on the key findings about trauma and effective teacher training to enrich their knowledge in classroom approaches. Doing a qualitative study gives the researcher the ability to observe relevant events, and the framework can be from specific concepts and the relationships between them for explanation and clarification. The review is broken down into sections to give a comprehensive overview of how trauma can impact a child's health and a child's academic outcomes. Trauma comes from the Greek word for wound and was originally only associated with physical injuries, but in today's world it can also refer to emotional pain. The word trauma is often used interchangeably with the word crisis, although they actually have different meanings. Crisis is defined as an event, series of events or circumstances that are disturbing and lead to danger. Trauma is the reaction to crisis, adversity, or stress. The major types of trauma include child maltreatment, sexual assault, domestic violence, war-related trauma, school community violence, medical trauma, painful loss, and natural disasters. Trauma is often put into two categories: acute, which is referred to as type 1 and is usually short-lived or a one-time event such as a natural disaster, death, assault, or an accident. Chronic, which is referred to as type 2, is related to events that occur over long periods of time and include neglect, domestic violence, abuse, or an illness. A test called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, also known as the ACE test, studies 10 stressors across 3 specific areas of stress: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. This test is given to adults to indicate the level of stressors that have been present in one's life to indicate the hallmark of childhood experiences. So a higher number on this test can lead to a higher probability of health problems. The ACE test is one example that illustrates how early childhood experiences can have devastating or long-lasting effect on a child, and that's why a loving and supportive environment is critical. A child may respond in a number of ways: emotionally, physically, and behaviorally. An emotional reaction is when a child feels anxious, fearful, angry, and victimized and displays these feelings by not handing in work or being unwilling to work with others. A physical impact can be shown through sleep disturbances, headaches, and stomach aches. A behavioral impact could be seen through aggressive actions, self-destruction, or withdrawal. School performance also is affected by trauma because students have difficulty concentrating and often miss a lot of school and lose their motivation. This leads to lower grades and eventually higher dropout rates. The future for these untreated traumatized children also looks bleak because they are looking at a greater risk of poverty, adverse health outcomes, and adoption of self-medicating behaviors like alcoholism, drug abuse, overeating, and gambling. Teachers are in a unique position to observe and respond to traumatized students because they are a trusted and consistent figure in a child's life. MTSS schools may use a multi-tiered system of supports that offer a continuum of services to students. Tier 1 involves the entire school personnel taking an active role with positive behavior programs and supports. Tier 2 and 3 are more individualized and intensive depending on the student's needs. PLC is a professional learning community. It is a support team that gathers information regarding observations of readiness skills, suspected trauma, classroom participation or communication, social and emotional feelings, and language use. Together, these all align with other responses in preparedness for better long-term positive outcomes. Protective factors give us some ideas that help guide us in helping children in our classrooms. Many factors promote the possibility of positive outcomes that can improve a staff's knowledge of creating a trauma-sensitive environment. School leaders need to provide strategic planning and training for teachers, setting routines, discipline policies, and communication procedures for students and parents so everyone feels engaged and valued. The Maslow hierarchy of learning is referenced in a book called Help for Billy, and it shows a pyramid which points out how schools are typically designed with learning being the most important, and a comparison pyramid shows what students need most, which is to have their basic needs met. So by looking at the chart, you can see that teachers should be mindful that according to Maslow, children's academic needs really only come into focus once their basic needs of health, food, and safety have been met. In all the research, it is emphasized again and again that students need a strong and supportive family, a strong support system, and well-developed coping skills to overcome many of the obstacles and challenges they face each day in the classroom and in life. After the research was complete, which was the most extensive section of the research proposal, Chapter 3 looks at the methodology used in this qualitative study design. It looks at the impact of trauma on students' emotional well-being and academic performance and how teachers can best respond. They involve open-ended interview questions of participants that reflect their observations, perspectives, experiences, and needs. This is a predictive design that was chosen because of its exploratory nature and its reliance on observations and interviews. A natural classroom setting can give meaning of people's experiences and gives more of a comprehensive perspective. The design gives an opportunity to look at the realities of a situation and may offer some information on why people think and act the way that they do. The characteristics of a good research question. To help answer the research questions in this study, a sampling of teachers participated in an informal emailed interview session about their experiences with traumatized children and their situational strategies and opinions. My specific research interviews began with general demographic questions, experience and strategies, and school protocols and needs. Natural classroom sets the scene for the observations and for the collection of the information. Context in a study can be best understood in the actual places in which they occur and results in greater reliability of the data. The researcher is the one who decides on the questions, sequence, and wording, and so I was the one who chose to use interviews to increase comprehensiveness of the data to involve reasons, goals, and values. Participants in qualitative studies are the sample of individuals who will be involved, and in this study, teachers were chosen as the participants to be interviewed. There is a sample taken because I would, as the researcher, use my personal judgment to select a specific sample of participants rather than just choosing among the general population. I would choose participants who possess awareness and understanding of the situation. The 6 female participants would come from diverse backgrounds and range from age 25 to 48 with teaching experience ranging from 5 to 25 years. All participants will have interacted with students who have been exposed to a traumatic event or who have displayed trauma symptoms. Data for the qualitative study is collected in the form of pictures and words that may include notes, observations, pictures, interviews, recordings, official records, and videotapes. Data for this particular study would be collected in the form of open-ended interview questions on their demographics, experiences, school protocols, and needs. The participants would not discuss the responses with anyone else, but would be expected to provide feedback after the findings were analyzed and written. Analyzing data in a qualitative study gives a researcher a look at human behaviors, attitudes, or patterns, and that can give further insight into forecasting behaviors that may result from a particular event or circumstance. Triangulation checks validity and rechecks data. Answers to interview questions would be reflected on the researcher with intent to understand the perspectives and needs of the participants. A clearer picture could be provided by preparing a thick description, which may include a more detailed response or actual quotations. All of this analysis would help give teachers a more knowledgeable response to trauma and can give further understanding of its impact. The goal of Chapter 3 methods was to outline the research method used to answer the research problem. I looked at a qualitative design to give a more holistic impression to answering the research questions. I wanted to provide a more complete picture of the research problem and gain more insight into some responses to the needs and concerns of the traumatized students who enter classrooms every day. I wanted to examine more closely the quality of relationships, activities, and situations by looking at the participants' perspectives, opinions, and experiences. Recognizing and understanding students' needs, all of us are dedicated to becoming more knowledgeable in our response to children who display emotional or behavioral problems as a result of their traumatic event. We need to collaborate with parents and communities to help our students' needs be met as we help them to develop strong social connections and work together to build positive parental, school, and family supportive relationships. Through this study, I gathered more insight into the effects of trauma and gained a new awareness of the most effective responses to the needs of my affected students. Also, the sampling procedures and examples gave me an opportunity to look at different research methods and enabled a better understanding of the research process. Through this collection, analysis, and interpretation, I gained an appreciation for the benefits of research and especially the value of qualitative studies that investigate relationships and situations. Trauma is a topic where process and perspectives are a particular significance, and I hope that I have given some of you some information that you may be able to create a more trauma-sensitive environment in your own classroom. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.